I always prided myself on my work. I had been the lead systems engineer at Veltria Housing for 18 years, building their entire infrastructure from scratch, ensuring everything ran smoothly, and constantly finding ways to improve and expand. To the higher-ups, I was just the guy who made everything work in the background, the one who kept the wheels turning. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked it that way. I had my routine, my processes, and most importantly, the respect of my colleagues. That was, of course, until the day everything came crashing down. Graham Vickers, the new Chief Technology Officer, walked into my office with a look on his face that I could immediately tell wasn't good. He handed me a termination letter, his voice cold as he explained, "We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary. Nothing personal, just cost cutting." Cost cutting? I'd dedicated nearly 2 decades to Veltria, building its foundation, and now I was being tossed aside like a piece of paper that had outlived its use. I was angry, sure, but I wasn't stupid. I didn't react right away, and that's where I knew my real power lay. No one had ever seen me coming. No one had ever taken me seriously enough to realize how long I could wait, how long I could build my revenge. At first, I didn't say a word. I didn't beg for my job, I didn't shout, and I didn't storm out in a dramatic fit of rage. I simply nodded, walked out of that meeting, and left the office like it was any other day. But inside, I was calculating. I'd always been the calm one, the one who thought things through before acting. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, and it wasn't about getting revenge, just to feel better. This was about proving to myself, and to Graham, that he'd made the worst mistake of his life. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always hit you at first, but when it does, you realize something. It's not about what they took from you, it's about what they'll lose in the end. I wasn't going to jump into anything rash. No, I was going to bide my time, gather the information I needed, and watch the world around me unravel before making my move. I would wait until the perfect moment, and I would be ready. Days turned into weeks, and I focused on making sure I didn't show the slightest hint of weakness. I didn't let my anger control me. Instead, I began to gather the pieces of the puzzle. I started making connections outside of the company. Friends, former colleagues, anyone who could give me insight into what was really going on inside Veltria, now that Graham had taken the reins. I paid attention to the small details. I noticed how Graham's friends were being promoted into roles they were unqualified for, how they were slowly destroying the very thing I'd spent years building. They were too busy patting each other on the back, oblivious to the cracks forming in the foundation. I wasn't blind to it. I knew this company, and I knew how it worked. I just needed to wait for the right opportunity. In the meantime, I focused on myself. I made sure my skills were sharp, I kept an eye on the industry, and I made myself invaluable. I wasn't just some forgotten engineer, I was Victor Hale, and I knew my worth. I began documenting every misstep, every bad decision Graham made, keeping a mental ledger of everything. I wasn't going to burn any bridges immediately. I was going to let him make the mistakes, and then I would expose him for who he really was. A man who had no idea what he was doing. It wasn't until a year later that I saw it. The cracks had become so wide that even Graham couldn't ignore them. The company was hemorrhaging money. Projects were over budget, deadlines were missed, and the clients I had worked so hard to build relationships with were now questioning everything. And yet, Graham continued to ignore the signs, too busy trying to surround himself with sycophants who only told him what he wanted to hear. I didn't need to rush in with a sledgehammer. I didn't need to make a scene. No, this was the moment I had been waiting for. I received an anonymous tip about a financial misstep, a small detail that, if left unchecked, would turn into a major issue. This was my chance, my opening. I carefully crafted an anonymous report and sent it to the board of directors. The report outlined the financial discrepancies and poor decisions Graham had been making since he arrived. I didn't need to confront him. I just needed the right people to see what I had seen. And now, they would. The emergency board meeting was called, and I watched from the sidelines as Graham's world came crumbling down. The board was furious, questioning him about everything he had done wrong. The evidence was undeniable, and Graham had no defense. The man who had fired me to bring in his friend, the man who thought he could outsmart me, was now left without any answers. But here's the thing. I didn't feel elated. I didn't jump up in celebration. I felt calm, satisfied, but not victorious. My revenge wasn't about watching Graham squirm. It was about watching him fail because of his own arrogance and stupidity. His friends? Gone. The company he had tried to build with them? In ruins. And I was nowhere to be found in the chaos. I didn't need to stand over him and gloat. He knew why it happened, and I didn't need to say a word. The consequences of his betrayal were more than enough. For me, it wasn't about the downfall of another person. It was about reclaiming control. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had always known my worth, and now I had proved it to myself. The job at Veltria was gone, but I wasn't. I wasn't broken or bitter. I was ready to move forward, a little wiser, a little stronger. The company moved on, and so did I. Graham's career, however, had hit a permanent roadblock. It wasn't that I wanted to destroy him, it was that he had destroyed himself. All I did was watch it unfold. In the weeks that followed, things started to settle. The board had quietly removed Graham from his position, and the company was scrambling to pick up the pieces. They had to apologize to clients and try to mend relationships, but the damage was done. The people who had once blindly followed Graham's every move were now jumping ship, one by one, seeking employment elsewhere. It was an ironic turn of events, really. Graham's loyalty to his friends had ultimately cost him everything. I stayed out of the public eye during this time. There was no need for me to go back to the company or to confront anyone. I had already moved on, and watching the chaos from a distance was all the satisfaction I needed. In fact, there was a part of me that couldn't help but feel a sense of catharsis. The company was now realizing what they had lost in me, but I wasn't interested in going back. Instead, I focused on my next chapter. With my reputation intact and my skills more honed than ever, opportunities began to appear. I was contacted by a few of the top players in the industry who had heard about my work through my connections. I took my time, making sure that I was aligning myself with people who appreciated hard work, integrity, and experience over favoritism. But there was something else that lingered in my mind. The betrayal wasn't just about a job, a company, or even revenge. It had taught me something deeper. It had shown me that sometimes the best course of action isn't to react immediately, but to wait, to plan, and to let the world unfold on its own. People make mistakes. They get caught in their own lies and ambitions. The trick was to watch, to wait, and then strike when the timing was right. I had learned a valuable lesson over the past year. Revenge, if done correctly, doesn't have to be about destruction. It doesn't have to involve dramatic confrontations or displays of anger. It's about reclaiming what's yours, proving your worth, and letting the other person see how their actions have led to their own downfall. As for Graham, I have no idea what became of him after he was ousted. I heard through the grapevine that he'd taken a job at a smaller company, but I didn't care to follow his story. He was no longer my concern. The only thing that mattered was that I had taken control of my life once more. I wasn't a victim of betrayal. I was someone who had simply outlasted it. There's a sense of peace that comes when you've moved beyond something that once hurt you. Revenge, in the end, wasn't about feeling superior. It was about reclaiming my own power. I had already proven that I could be calm in the face of betrayal. that I could take a step back and wait for the right moment. In a way, this experience had reshaped me. I was no longer that man who would fight back impulsively. I had grown into someone who understood the importance of patience, self-respect, and timing. Sometimes the best revenge is not to seek vengeance at all. It's about letting the world take care of the consequences. And in the end, it was the world that punished Graham, not me. As I look back now, I don't feel the need for any grand confrontation. The victory, if you can even call it that, wasn't in seeing him fall. It was in knowing that I had kept my dignity and my integrity intact. That, in itself, was the sweetest revenge. And that's how I moved on, with peace, with control, and with the understanding that sometimes patience is the most powerful weapon of all. It wasn't long before the next phase of my life began to take shape. After leaving Veltria, I kept my focus on the things that truly mattered: my growth, my craft, and the work that I'd always loved. The past year had been a hard lesson in both patience and perseverance, and while I had moved beyond the pain of betrayal, I could feel the seeds of something greater growing within me. I started my own consulting business. It was a leap, but it was one I had been quietly planning for years. I had spent so long building systems for other companies, always helping others succeed, but never getting the recognition I truly deserved. Now, I had the freedom to chart my own course on my own terms. I didn't immediately broadcast my new venture. I wasn't looking for fame or validation. I simply wanted to build something meaningful, a business that reflected who I was: intelligent, methodical, and dependable. Word of mouth spread quickly, and before I knew it, I was taking on high-level projects with some of the most reputable companies in the industry. But while I was out there securing contracts and building my own brand, I could never quite shake the feeling that everything I had done was tied to one thing: the fall of Graham Vickers. Months passed, and as my business grew, I continued to stay disconnected from the world of Veltria housing. I never looked back, but I would occasionally hear whispers about the company's struggles. The whispers weren't kind. The new leadership was having trouble gaining traction, and many of the projects I had worked on with them were now in disarray. Despite their efforts to fix things, the company seemed to be spiraling further into chaos. I didn't take any joy in this. I wasn't one of those people who danced on another person's misfortune. Graham had been the architect of his own downfall, but I knew the company had suffered as well. I had been loyal to Veltria and the people there before it all fell apart. I didn't want to see them fail, but I had no intention of helping them pick up the pieces either. I had moved on. It wasn't until an unexpected email arrived in my inbox that the past crept back into my life. It was from a former colleague at Veltria, a friend I had made over the years, someone I trusted. The subject line was simple: "Victor, we need to talk." When I opened the email, it wasn't just a casual check-in or a message of apology. Instead, it was an urgent plea. My former colleague had shared that Graham's downfall was only the beginning. In fact, it seemed that the company's board had been facing mounting pressure from investors. The company had fallen into disarray, and Graham's mismanagement had caught up with them. They were now facing legal issues tied to the very financial discrepancies I had exposed. And worse, they were starting to lose key clients because of it. But that wasn't all. The real twist was that my former colleague, now in a high-ranking position, revealed that there had been a lot of speculation about the company's failure to innovate under Graham's leadership. Veltria had been losing ground in the industry, and some of the higher-ups were starting to point fingers. There was talk of a major shake-up. I could sense that this might be my moment to really step back into the world I had left behind, on my terms. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about watching others suffer. No, this was about opportunity. And if I played my cards right, I could not only show the industry what I was capable of, but also ensure that I was never in a position where I had to rely on someone like Graham ever again. I took my time to think things through. Part of me wondered if I should just let everything continue its inevitable decline. After all, I had already won. Graham was out, the company was falling apart, and my own career was soaring. But there was another part of me, the strategist I had always been, that knew this was a rare opportunity. I decided to reach out to my former colleague. I didn't make any promises, but I let them know I was open to discussing what options were available for someone like me to come back, on my terms. I didn't need to run the company, but I could help guide it back to a place where it could regain its former success. And I could do it in a way that would ensure my name was remembered. Not for being a casualty of the system, but for being the one who had the vision and the experience to turn things around. I had to laugh to myself as I thought about the irony of it all. Graham had thought he could replace me, thinking that a new, younger generation would take over and steer the company to greater success. But he had been wrong. Leadership was more than just making connections. It was about understanding the system, the people, and the intricacies that no one could see until it was too late. Graham's mistake wasn't just in firing me, it was in underestimating my value. In the end, I didn't return to Veltria. It wasn't about the company or the position anymore. It was about understanding that my journey had taken me exactly where I needed to be. I had built something of my own, something that didn't rely on the fickleness of others. The world had tried to knock me down, and it had, in fact, given me everything I needed to rise again. As I looked back on the past few years, I realized that everything had led to this moment. Not in a grand dramatic showdown with Graham, but in the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had outlasted him. And as for the company, they would continue to flounder, trying to recover from their mistakes. But I wasn't a part of their story anymore. I had written my own. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.
If you've enjoyed this story of patience, strategy, and revenge, don't forget to like this video. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. And if you've ever experienced a betrayal that led to unexpected consequences, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss out on more true stories, lessons in strategy, and tales of triumph. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply letting things unfold on their own.